The council chamber floated in the darkness of space like a massive glass sphere. Inside, 12 alien species sat in their designated zones, their bodies protected by energy shields that glowed with soft colors. Commander Do-hyun Park stood in the human section, his hands gripped tight behind his back. He wore the dark blue uniform of the Terran Defense Fleet, and on his chest the silver emblem of Earth caught the light. Do-hyun had known this day would come. For 70 years, humanity had tried to be good members of the Galactic Council. They had followed the rules, paid their taxes, and kept their military small. But the other species had never truly accepted them. Humans were too young, too aggressive, too different. And now the older species had decided to do something about it. The Arbiter spoke from the center of the chamber. The Arbiter was a luminar, a being made of pure energy that looked like a floating ball of light. Its voice echoed through every translator in the room. The Council has reached a decision regarding the human question, the Arbiter said. After careful consideration of all evidence, we have determined that humanity poses a Category 5 threat to galactic stability. Do-hyun felt his jaw tighten. Category 5. That was the highest threat level. It was reserved for species that the Council believed would destroy the galaxy, if left unchecked. In the entire history of the Council, only 4 species had ever been given that designation. All 4 had been wiped out. A holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed human warships patrolling near the borders of Council space. It showed Earth's colonies spreading across 17 different star systems. It showed human factories building ships and weapons faster than any young species should be able to. Humanity expands too quickly, said the representative from the Vrin hive. The Vrin looked like giant insects with 6 legs and compound eyes that glittered like black diamonds. They multiply like a plague. They build weapons when we tell them to build farms. They explore systems we have marked as restricted. The humans are dangerous, added the Tydalis representative, a creature that looked like flowing water held together by some invisible force. They refuse to give us access to their military computers. They refuse to let us inspect their weapons. What are they hiding? Do-hyun wanted to scream. Of course, humans were hiding things. Every species in the Council was hiding things. The difference was that the older species had power, and humanity did not. Or so they thought. The Council has voted, the Arbiter continued. The vote is unanimous. All human worlds will be placed under immediate quarantine. The human military fleet will be dismantled. Earth itself will be occupied by Council peacekeeping forces to ensure compliance. This process will begin in 30 standard hours. The other human delegates gasped. A woman named Yoonji, the chief diplomat, stepped forward. You cannot do this. We have broken no laws. We have threatened no one. You exist, the Vrin representative said coldly. That is threat enough. We have seen species like yours before. You grow too fast, fight too well, adapt too quickly. If we wait another 100 years, you will be unstoppable. Better to end this now while we still can. Do-hyun moved to his communication panel. His fingers flew across the controls, entering a code that only 5 people in the entire human government knew. The message was simple, just 3 words. But those 3 words would change everything. Activate Protocol Jericho. The message shot through space faster than light, carried by quantum communicators that the Council didn't know humans had developed. In 30 seconds, it would reach Earth. In 30 minutes, every human colony would know what was coming. Council security forces began moving toward the human delegation booth. They were big creatures, hired from a warrior species called the Korthan. They looked like massive reptiles with armor-plated skin and weapons that could vaporize a human in seconds. You will come with us, one of them growled. You will be held until the occupation is complete. If you resist, you will be neutralized. Do-hyun looked at his fellow humans. There were 12 of them in total, including Yoonji and several military advisors. They all looked scared, but they also looked determined. They had known this might happen. They had all volunteered to be here knowing they might never go home. We're not going anywhere, Do-hyun said quietly. The Korthan raised his weapon. That was not a request. Before anyone could move, the lights in the chamber went dark. Emergency power kicked in a second later, bathing everything in red light. Alarms began screaming. On the holographic displays, red warning symbols flashed across every screen. What is happening? The Arbiter demanded. A technician from one of the lower species rushed forward. Sir, we have a massive fleet movement. The Council's first armada is being mobilized. 40,000 ships are preparing to jump to hyperspace. On whose authority? The Arbiter demanded. Your authority, sir. The orders were signed 10 minutes ago. But the Arbiter had signed no such orders. Someone had hacked into the Council systems and given the command themselves. The fleet was moving toward Sol, toward Earth, toward humanity's home. Do-Yun allowed himself a small smile. Let them come. Let them bring their 40,000 ships. Let them think this would be easy. The Council had made a terrible mistake. They thought humans were weak because they were young. They thought human technology was primitive because it was different. They thought human ships were few in number because that was all they could see. They had no idea what was waiting for them at Earth. The Korthan grabbed Do-Yun's arm, pulling him away from the console. You knew this was coming, the creature snarled. You prepared for this. Of course we did, Do-Yun said. Did you really think we trusted you? Did you really think we believed in your peaceful counsel after studying your history? We've known since the day we joined that eventually you would try to destroy us, just like you destroyed the others. The chamber erupted in chaos. Aliens shouted at each other in a dozen different languages. The human delegates were dragged away, but they went without fighting. There was no point in fighting now. The real fight was about to begin far away from this chamber, in the cold space around humanity's home star. As the Korthan pushed him through the corridors toward the detention cells, Do-Hyun thought about Admiral Hee-Jin Choi. She was probably sitting in her command chair right now, watching the Council fleet appear on her sensors. She was probably smiling, that cold smile she had when she knew she was about to win. Hee-Jin had spent 50 years preparing for this war, 50 years building ships in secret, training soldiers in tactics the aliens had never seen, developing weapons that Council law said were impossible. The Council thought it knew everything about human military capability. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The detention cell door slammed shut, leaving Do-Hyun in darkness. But he wasn't afraid. He closed his eyes and imagined the battle that was about to begin. 40,000 alien ships against 300 human vessels. The Council must think it would be over in minutes. They had no idea that those 300 ships were just decoys. They had no idea about the 2,000 stealth ships hiding in the asteroid belt. They had no idea about the weapons platforms on every moon, the fighter wings waiting in underground bunkers, the AI systems that would coordinate humanity's defense with precision no organic mind could match. The Council had declared war on humanity because they were afraid of what humans might become. They were about to discover that their fear was justified, but by then it would be too late. Admiral Hee-Jin Choi sat in her command chair aboard the orbital station called Sanctuary. She was 78 years old, and her hair had gone completely white decades ago. But her eyes were still sharp, and her mind was sharper. On the main display in front of her, 40,000 red dots appeared at the edge of the solar system. The Council fleet had arrived. Right on time, she said quietly. Around her, the command center buzzed with activity. Young officers worked at their stations, their faces lit by the glow of their screens. None of them looked scared. They had all trained for this day their entire lives. All ships report ready, said Captain Minho Lee, standing at the tactical station. Minho was 42 years old and had been in the fleet since he was 18. He commanded the dreadnought Indomitable, the largest warship humanity had ever built. A ship the Council didn't know existed. Broadcasting surrender request, reported a communications officer. The Council is demanding we power down all weapons and prepare to be boarded. Hee-Jin smiled. Ignore it. Let them think we're panicking. How long until they enter weapons range? 12 minutes at current speed, Minho said. 12 minutes. Hee-Jin closed her eyes and thought back to the day humanity had first made contact with the Council. She had been a lieutenant then, fresh out of the academy and full of hope. Humanity had finally met other intelligent life. They were joining a community of peaceful species that had existed for thousands of years. But Hee-Jin had studied history, both human and alien. She knew that peace never lasted. She knew that the strong always feared the weak becoming strong. So she had started asking questions. She had researched what happened to other young species that joined the Council, and what she found had terrified her. 23 civilizations had joined the Council over the past 100,000 years. Of those, only 12 still existed. The others had simply disappeared. The official records said they had destroyed themselves in wars or natural disasters, but Hyejin had found fragments of older data, hidden in archives that the Council thought were deleted. Those fragments told a different story. Every disappeared species had shown the same traits: fast expansion, aggressive exploration, rapid technological development. And every time, the Council had moved to contain them. The containment always ended the same way. Hyejin had brought her findings to Earth's government. At first, they hadn't believed her, but she had been persistent, and eventually, they had listened. They had agreed to prepare in secret, to build weapons and ships that broke Council law, to train soldiers in tactics that no alien would expect. For 50 years, humanity had been getting ready for this war. Enemy fleet is splitting into 3 groups, Minho reported, pulling Hyejin back to the present. They're surrounding the system, classic encirclement pattern. They think we'll try to run, Hyejin said. Show them our visible fleet. Let them see our 300 ships. On the display, 300 blue dots appeared, arranged in a defensive formation around Earth. They were old ships, some of them dating back to humanity's first attempts at building warships. They looked outdated and weak compared to the sleek vessels of the Council fleet. That was exactly what Hyejin wanted them to think. Council is broadcasting again, the communications officer said. They're offering terms. If we surrender now, Earth will only be occupied for 50 years. If we resist, they will show no mercy. Tell them to come and take it, Hyejin said. The officer looked surprised, but he relayed the message. Across the system, the Council fleet accelerated. They were done talking. Range in 5 minutes, Minho said. Permission to activate stealth fleet? Not yet, Hyejin said. Let them commit. Let them think they're winning. The Council fleet opened fire first. Thousands of energy beams and missiles streaked across space toward the human formation. The 300 human ships returned fire, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. One by one, the human ships began to explode. On the Council flagship, the alien commander watched the battle with satisfaction. Humans were dying. Their ships were burning. This would be over quickly, just as predicted. But then something strange happened. The human ships that were exploding didn't have anyone inside them. They were drones controlled by AI from a distance. Every destroyed ship was actually empty, and while the Council fleet was busy shooting at empty vessels, 2,000 real human warships appeared from nowhere. They had been hiding in the asteroid belt, their engines cold, their hulls coated with special materials that made them invisible to sensors. Now they powered up all at once, and the space around Earth lit up with the blue glow of human engines. All ships engage, Hyejin commanded. The real battle began. Captain Minho Lee stood on the bridge of the Indomitable as it surged forward. The dreadnought was massive, 3 kilometers long and bristling with weapons that the Council had banned centuries ago. Railguns that could fire metal slugs at 30% the speed of light. Nuclear missiles that could vaporize entire fleets. Cyber warfare systems that could hack into enemy computers and turn their own weapons against them. Target the flagship, Minho ordered. All forward guns fire. The Indomitable shook as its weapons unleashed hell. 40 railgun slugs shot across space, each one carrying the kinetic energy of a nuclear bomb. They hit the Council flagship's shields and punched right through. The ancient vessel, which had survived 1,000 battles, suddenly found itself with massive holes torn in its hull. All around the solar system, human ships attacked with a fury that shocked the aliens. They didn't fight like the Council expected. They didn't line up in neat formations and exchange fire at a distance. Instead, they darted in close, using suicide tactics that would have been insane if the ships had actual people inside them. Most of the human ships were controlled by AI, with only a few officers aboard to make strategic decisions. Commander Jiwoo Nam piloted her destroyer, the Retribution, straight into the heart of the Council formation. She was 31 years old and had never seen actual combat before today. But she had trained in simulators for years, and she knew exactly what to do. All weapons, continuous fire, she shouted. Don't give them time to adapt. The Retribution's guns blazed, It was a small ship, barely 200 meters long, but it was fast and deadly. Jiwoo weaved between larger council vessels, firing at their engines and weapon ports, crippling them before they could respond. 2 council cruisers tried to pin her between them. Jiwoo grinned and accelerated straight up, perpendicular to the plane of the battle. The 2 cruisers following her crashed into each other in a spectacular explosion. But there were too many of them. Even with the advantage of surprise, humanity was still outnumbered 20-1. For every council ship they destroyed, 2 more took its place. Jiwoo saw a massive alien battleship moving toward Earth. If it got close enough, it could bombard the planet from orbit. She made a decision without thinking twice. "All crew to escape pods," she ordered. "You have 30 seconds. Her bridge crew stared at her. "Commander, what are you doing?" "Saving Earth. Now go." The crew evacuated. Jiwoo was alone on the bridge when she turned the Retribution toward the Council flagship, Eternal Harmony. She pushed the engines to maximum, past the red line, past the safety limits. The ship began to shake and groan. "For Earth," she whispered. The Retribution slammed into the Eternal Harmony at full speed. The impact created an explosion so bright it could be seen from Earth's surface. Both ships vanished in a ball of fire. The Council's fleet admiral died instantly, along with his entire command staff. Without their leader, the Council fleet fell into chaos. Ships broke formation, orders conflicted with each other, and in that chaos, humanity struck harder. Admiral Hyejin watched from Sanctuary as the battle turned. They were still losing ships, still losing people, but the Council fleet was breaking apart. They had come expecting an easy victory over a primitive species. Instead, they were fighting for their lives against an enemy that refused to follow the rules of civilized warfare. "Enemy fleet is retreating," Minho reported. "They're jumping to hyperspace." Of the 40,000 ships that had entered the Sol system, only 32,000 escaped. 8,000 alien vessels floated dead in space, their crews gone, their technology shattered. Humanity had won its first battle, but everyone in the command center knew this was just the beginning. The Council would return with more ships, more weapons, more determination. They would try to crush humanity with overwhelming force. Hyejin stood up from her chair. Her body ached from sitting still for hours, but her mind was clear. "Send a message to all human colonies," she said. "The war has begun. Execute Phase 2. Across 17 star systems, humanity prepared for what came next. News of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. The Council tried to control the information, but it was impossible. Too many species had monitoring stations near Sol. Too many witnesses had seen the impossible happen. A young species, barely 70 years old in galactic terms, had defeated a Council armada. On thousands of worlds, people watched the recordings in disbelief. They saw human ships moving with speed and precision that shouldn't be possible. They saw tactics that no civilized species would use. They saw courage that bordered on madness. And for the first time in 100,000 years, the Galactic Council looked vulnerable. Dr. Yoonji Kang sat in a cell on the Council station. But she wasn't idle. The Council had underestimated how much technology humans could hide in plain sight. Her translator device wasn't just a translator. It was also a powerful transmitter. While the guards thought she was sleeping, she was actually broadcasting to every corner of the galaxy. "People of the galaxy," her message began. "My name is Yoonji Kang. I am a human. Today, the Galactic Council tried to destroy my species. They voted unanimously to occupy our worlds, dismantle our military, and place us under permanent control. Do you know why? Because we were growing too fast. Because we were becoming too strong. Because we refused to be weak." She paused, letting her words sink in. Then she continued, "But here is what the Council doesn't want you to know. This isn't the first time they've done this. Over the past 100,000 years, 11 species have disappeared after being labeled as threats. The Council erased them, and they would have erased us too if we hadn't fought back." Yoonji transmitted files, data she had gathered over decades of careful research, files that showed the truth about the Council's dark history, files that proved the peaceful galactic government was actually built on genocide. "We didn't want this war," she said. "We begged for peace. We asked only to be left alone to grow and explore." They answered with an extinction order. Now they have learned what happens when you try to kill humanity. We don't forgive. We don't forget. And we never ever surrender. The transmission ended. Within hours, it had been copied and shared on 1 million worlds. The Council tried to suppress it, but the damage was done. Seeds of doubt had been planted. In the Council's emergency chamber, the 12 ruling species gathered again. But this time, the unity was gone. The representatives argued and blamed each other while holograms showed the disaster at Sol playing on repeat. We should mobilize everything, the Vryn Hive Queen said. Her insect body clicked with agitation. 500,000 ships. We crushed them completely this time. No mercy, no hesitation. That will take months to organize, the Tydalis representative said. His watery form rippled with uncertainty. And what if they defeat us again? What if we send 500,000 ships and they destroy those too? Impossible, the Vryn Queen insisted. They won through tricks and cowardice. They used weapons that civilized species banned millennia ago. They fought like animals. In a fair battle, they would lose. There is no such thing as a fair battle, said the Saurian ambassador. The reptilian being leaned back in his seat. Only battles you win and battles you lose. The humans won. Perhaps we should consider why. The Arbiter's light pulsed with frustration. The decision stands. Humanity will be contained. We will gather a fleet large enough that no amount of trickery can save them. But as the Council argued, humanity was already moving. Fleet Admiral Taijun Han stood in the war room beneath Luna's surface. He was 65 years old, a veteran of humanity's expansion into space and one of the few people who had planned this war from the very beginning. On the walls around him, tactical displays showed Council military positions across the entire galaxy. Phase 2 begins now, he said to the assembled officers. We hit them everywhere at once. We show them that defending their own worlds is more important than attacking ours. Operation Thunderfall had 17 targets. Each one was a critical Council military installation, shipyards where their vessels were built, supply depots that fed their fleets, communication hubs that coordinated their forces. Taijun had chosen these targets carefully over decades of intelligence gathering. Remember, he told his commanders, we're not trying to hold territory. We hit hard, we destroy everything of military value, and we leave. Make them afraid. Make them realize that nowhere is safe. 17 strike forces jumped to hyperspace simultaneously. Each one was small, no more than 100 ships. But each one carried enough firepower to devastate an unprepared target. Lieutenant Sora Yoon sat in the cockpit of her fighter, the Ghost. She was 24 years old and the youngest person ever to be chosen for the experimental fighter program. The Ghost was invisible to sensors, faster than anything the Council had, and armed with weapons that could punch holes in battleship armor. She was heading to the Vryn home system with 11 other fighters. Their target was the defense network that protected the Vryn's primary shipyard. The network was designed to stop 10,000 attackers. The Vryn had never imagined that 12 small fighters could be a threat. Approaching target, her wingman Jinwoo said over the radio. Defense grid is active. They don't see us yet. Sora checked her instruments. The stealth systems were working perfectly. To the Vryn sensors, the area around their shipyard was empty. They had no idea that death was approaching at 0.8 light speed. On my mark, Sora said. 3, 2, 1, mark. The 12 fighters dropped their stealth and attacked. They moved so fast that the defense network barely had time to register their presence before they were inside the perimeter. Sora's fingers danced across her controls as she wove between automated gun platforms and missile batteries. She fired a single torpedo. It was a small thing, barely the size of her arm, but it carried a nuclear warhead with a yield of 50 megatons. The torpedo streaked toward the central control station of the defense network and detonated. The explosion created a temporary star. When it faded, the entire defense grid was offline. Secondary targets, Sora commanded. Hit the shipyard. The fighters spread out, each one attacking a different section of the massive orbital construction facility. They fired missiles, railgun slugs, and laser beams. Within 2 minutes, the shipyard that had built thousands of Council warships was a twisted wreck of metal drifting in space. All fighters, jump out, Sora ordered. They vanished into hyperspace before the Vryn could even launch a counterattack. The entire raid had taken less than 5 minutes. But the damage would take years to repair. Similar attacks happened across the galaxy. Human strike forces appeared without warning, destroyed their targets, and disappeared. The Council's military infrastructure began to collapse. Ships couldn't be built fast enough to replace losses. Supplies stopped reaching the front lines. Communication became sporadic as relay stations went dark. But the humans always left one thing behind. At every attack site, they burned a message into the hull of the largest surviving structure. The letters were kilometers high, visible from space, written in the common galactic language. We wanted peace, you chose war. Surrender, or we will show you what humanity does to tyrants. On the planet Soros Prime, the Saurian Military Council gathered to discuss the war. They were a warrior species, proud and fierce, and they respected strength. What they had seen from humanity impressed them. The humans fight well, General Kairos said. He was ancient. His scales faded with age, but his mind was still sharp. They don't fight like the Council. They fight to win whatever it takes. They are barbaric, another general protested. They use forbidden weapons. They target civilians' infrastructure. No, Kairos corrected. They target military infrastructure. Notice that their raids kill very few people. They could slaughter millions if they wanted to. Instead, they destroy facilities and leave. They are making a point. What point? The young general asked. That they can hit us anywhere, anytime. That no defense is perfect. That the cost of fighting them is higher than the Council wants to admit. Kairos stood slowly. I propose we withdraw our forces from the war. Let the Vryn and Luminar fight if they want. The Saurian Imperium has no interest in genocide. The vote was close, but it passed. The Saurians became the first Council species to formally withdraw from the war against humanity. Others followed. The Tidalis Collective pulled back its fleet. The Korthan mercenaries demanded triple pay to continue fighting. Even some of the ancient species began to question whether this war was worth the cost. The Vryn and the Luminar remained committed, but they were increasingly alone. In his cell on the Council station, Commander Do-hyun Park listened to reports from the guards. They didn't realize he could understand their language without the translator. He heard them talking about the raids, about the fear spreading through Council space, about ships refusing to deploy. Do-hyun smiled in the darkness. Everything was going according to plan. The Council had started this war believing it would be easy. Now they were discovering the truth that every human warrior knew. It's not the size of the dog in the fight. It's the size of the fight in the dog, and humanity had a lot of fight in them. 6 months into the war, the Galactic Council had lost 30% of its military strength. Thousands of ships floated dead in space. Dozens of military installations lay in ruins. And the worst part was that humanity seemed unstoppable. Every time the Council thought they understood human tactics, the humans changed them. Every time they built a defense, the humans found a way through it. Species that had known nothing but peace for millennia now lived in fear. They watched their skies, wondering if human ships would appear without warning. They questioned their leaders, asking why the Council had started a war they couldn't win, but the Council wasn't ready to give up. They had one final weapon, something they had hoped never to use again: the Purge Fleet. The Purge Fleet consisted of 5,000 ships commanded by an ancient AI called the Nullifier. This AI had been built millions of years ago by a species long extinct. It knew only one thing: how to destroy civilizations completely. The Council had used it 3 times before, against species that threatened galactic order. Each time, entire worlds had been reduced to lifeless rocks. The Vryn Hive Queen activated the Nullifier with a command that made her nervous. Even she feared this weapon. But humanity had to be stopped no matter the cost. Destroy the human colony of New Sol, she ordered. Leave no survivors. Show them what happens when primitive species challenge the Council. The Purge Fleet jumped to hyperspace, heading toward New Sol. The colony was home to 2 billion humans, the largest population outside of Earth itself. It was a beautiful world with green forests and blue oceans. Soon it would be dead. Major Bauman Che stood on New Sol's surface and watched the sky. He was 48 years old, a career military officer who had been assigned to this colony 20 years ago. Most people thought New Sol was just a farming world, a place where humans grew food and raised families. They had no idea what it really was. Sir, the Purge Fleet has been detected, his second-in-command reported. 5,000 ships. They'll be in orbit in 6 hours. Bowman nodded calmly. Begin evacuation of non-essential personnel. Everyone else, battle stations. Sir, shouldn't we evacuate everyone? That fleet will glass the planet. No, Bowman said. They won't get the chance. New Sol was built for this exact moment. The Council thinks this is just a farm world. They're about to learn otherwise. Across the planet, massive hatches began to open in the ground. What emerged looked like mountains rising from beneath the surface. But they weren't mountains. They were weapons. New Sol wasn't a colony. It was a gun. The entire planet had been turned into the largest railgun ever built by any species. It had taken 50 years to construct, working in absolute secrecy, moving earth and stone to hide the massive machinery beneath. The Council's satellites had seen construction, but they had been fooled by false data showing farms and cities. The railgun's barrel was 800 kilometers long. Its projectile was a solid tungsten slug the size of a skyscraper. When fired, it would accelerate to 0.99 light speed, carrying more kinetic energy than a supernova. Calculating trajectory, reported the weapons officer. Target locked on enemy flagship. Charging sequence initiated. The Purge fleet dropped out of hyperspace right where Bowman had predicted. The Nullifier AI analyzed New Sol with its sensors and determined there was no significant military presence, just farms and cities. Easy targets, the AI began to charge its planet-killing weapons. In 10 minutes, New Sol would be dead. Fire, Bowman said calmly. The entire planet shook. Mountains crumbled from the recoil. Forests were flattened by the shockwave. Every building on New Sol's surface lost its windows to the sonic boom. But the railgun fired successfully. The tungsten slug crossed the distance between the planet and the Purge fleet in 0.4 seconds. The Nullifier's sensors detected something coming, but the AI couldn't process what it was seeing. Nothing that large should be moving that fast. Nothing should have that much energy. The slug hit the Nullifier's flagship dead center. At 0.99 light speed, the tungsten didn't just punch through the ship. It vaporized it. The kinetic energy released was equivalent to 100,000 nuclear bombs going off simultaneously. The flagship and everything within 1,000 kilometers simply ceased to exist. The shockwave expanded outward, hitting the other ships of the Purge fleet. They had been flying in tight formation, which was tactical suicide, but the Nullifier hadn't expected an attack. Within 40 seconds, all 5,000 ships were either destroyed or so heavily damaged they could barely function. The few surviving ships jumped to hyperspace immediately, fleeing in terror from a weapon they couldn't understand. The mighty Purge fleet, which had ended 3 civilizations, had been destroyed by a single shot from a planet that wasn't supposed to be a weapon. Bowman surveyed the damage to New Sol. The railgun was probably destroyed after firing at such high power. Large sections of the planet's surface were devastated by the recoil, but the colony would survive. 2 billion people were still alive because of one massive gun. Send a message to Fleet Command, Bowman said. Tell them the Purge fleet is gone. New Sol stands. While the battle at New Sol was happening, Intelligence Officer Una O was working in a secret facility beneath Earth's ocean. She was 33 years old and had spent her entire career hunting for information about the Council. Now she had found something important. Una sat in front of a dozen computer screens analyzing data that had been stolen from Council archives during the war. Most of it was boring military logistics and supply reports. But hidden in one database, she found files that had been sealed for over 100,000 years. Oh my God, she whispered as she read. Oh my God. She called Admiral Do-Hyun Park immediately. He had been rescued from the Council station 2 months ago in a daring raid. Now he was back on Earth helping to coordinate the war effort. Admiral, you need to see this, Una said. I found something terrible. She transmitted the files to him. Do-Hyun read in silence, his face growing darker with each page. The files contained records of 23 species that had joined the Galactic Council over the past 100,000 years. 23 species that no longer existed. The official story was that they had destroyed themselves or died from natural disasters. But these secret files told the truth. Each species had been eliminated by the Council when they became too dangerous. The pattern was always the same. The species would be accused of aggressive expansion or military buildup. The Council would vote to contain them. If they resisted, the Council would destroy them completely and erase all records of what had happened. The files even included conversations between Council members discussing how to hide the genocides, how to create false historical records, how to make sure no one ever found out the truth. They've done this 23 times before, Do-Hyun said quietly, and they were going to make humanity number 24. We need to release this information, Yuna said. Every species in the galaxy needs to see what the Council really is. Do-Yun agreed. Within hours, the files were broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. Yuna made sure the transmission couldn't be blocked or deleted. It went to news networks, government databases, personal communication devices. Everyone would see the truth. The reaction was immediate and explosive. On 1,000 worlds, people took to the streets in protest. They demanded answers from their representatives. They called for the Council to be dissolved. They screamed for justice for the 23 species that had been murdered. 3 Council species formally withdrew from the organization within days. The Saurians not only withdrew, but also offered humanity a non-aggression pact and shared intelligence about Council military positions. The Tadalis went further, offering to sell weapons and supplies to human forces. Even the ancient species began to fracture. The Luminar Collective split into factions. Some wanted to continue the war, arguing that humanity was indeed dangerous and needed to be stopped. Others felt shame for what the Council had become and wanted to make peace. Only the Vryn remained fully committed to destroying humanity. The Hive Queen had invested too much in this war to back down now. Her species had been the primary force behind many of the past genocides. If humanity survived, the Vryn would be held accountable for tens of thousands of years of crimes. We gather every ship we have, the Queen announced to her hive. We combine our forces with the remaining Luminar. 750,000 ships. We jump to Sol together and end this once and for all. Humanity will not survive the day. The largest fleet in galactic history began to assemble. Ships came from a dozen different species. All those who still believed in the Council's mission or feared what would happen if humanity won. 750,000 vessels, each one powerful enough to destroy cities. Against them, humanity could field perhaps 5,000 ships at most. Even with superior tactics, the math didn't work. There was no way to win against such overwhelming numbers. But Admiral Hyejin Choi, watching the reports from her command center, didn't look worried. Instead, she looked sad. They still don't understand, she said to Captain Min Ho Lee. After everything we've shown them, they still think this is about military strength. What do you mean? Minho asked. They could bring 10 million ships and it wouldn't matter. Dr. Junho Kim stood in a laboratory buried 5 kilometers beneath Earth's surface. He was 56 years old and had been working on Project Omega for 30 years. Now finally his work would be used. He hoped it wouldn't be necessary. But if humanity had to die, they wouldn't die alone. Activating the network, he said to his team. May God forgive us. Across the galaxy, hidden devices began to power up. They had been placed secretly over decades, smuggled onto asteroids and moons near every major Council world. Hundreds of thousands of them, each one containing enough exotic matter to create a small black hole. But that wasn't their real purpose. When activated simultaneously, they would collapse the structure of hyperspace itself. Every hyperspace lane in the galaxy would become unstable, making faster-than-light travel impossible for thousands of years. Trade would stop. Communication between star systems would be cut off. The galactic civilization that had existed for 100,000 years would end in a single moment. It was humanity's doomsday weapon. If the Council destroyed Earth, a dead man's switch would activate the network. The galaxy would be plunged into a dark age that might last 10,000 years or more. Devices are armed, Junho reported, transmitting final warning to Council fleet. The message was simple. You can kill us, but if you do, you kill yourselves too. We will drag everyone into the darkness with us. Stand down or we all lose. The Council fleet was already in hyperspace, heading towards Sol. 750,000 ships, the largest military force ever assembled. The Vryn Hive Queen commanded from her flagship, confident that nothing could stop them now. Humanity's tricks wouldn't work against such overwhelming force. Then the message arrived. The Queen read it 3 times, trying to understand if it was a bluff. Her technical advisors analyzed the data that came with the message and confirmed the worst. The devices were real. They were positioned correctly. If activated, they would collapse hyperspace exactly as the humans claimed. They're insane, the Queen said. They would destroy galactic civilization rather than accept defeat. It appears so, her advisor replied. The devices have been in place for decades. This has been their plan from the beginning. The Queen felt something she had never experienced before, fear. Not fear of death, but fear of being remembered as the one who ended everything. Her species had existed for 50 million years. Would she be the queen who destroyed it all? But she had committed too much to back down. The fleet would continue to sulk. Humanity would surrender when they saw there was no other choice. They had to. Aboard the orbital station Sanctuary, Admiral Heejin Choi watched the approaching fleet on her displays. Behind her, every human military commander was gathered. They all knew what was about to happen. They all knew that this was probably the last day of their lives. The Council fleet will arrive in 1 hour, Captain Min-Ho Lee reported. All our ships are in position. We're ready. Heejin stood up slowly. Her body hurt from old age and too many years of stress. But her mind was still clear. She had spent her entire life preparing for this moment. Now it was here. Before we begin, she said to the assembled commanders, I want you all to know something. Whatever happens today, humanity has already won. We've shown the galaxy that young species don't have to bow to the old. We've exposed the Council's crimes. We've proved that courage matters more than numbers. Even if we all die today, we've changed the galaxy forever. The commanders nodded. Many of them had tears in their eyes. They were ready to die, but they wished it didn't have to be this way. Then something unexpected happened. A communication request came from the Council fleet. Not from the Vryn Queen, but from the Luminar Collective's eldest representative, Admiral Choi. The ancient voice said, This is Luminar Prime, speaking for those of us who still remember what we once were. We request permission to speak with you directly. Hyojin was surprised but accepted. A hologram appeared showing a being of pure light, ancient beyond measure. Luminar Prime had been alive for over 1 million years and had seen the Council rise from nothing to dominate the galaxy. We have seen your doomsday weapon, Luminar Prime said. We know you are serious. We know that if we attack, the galaxy dies with you. Then you understand our position, Hyojin replied. We will die free or we will take you all with us. Yes, and that is why I am speaking to you now. The being's light pulsed with emotion. Admiral, we remember now. We remember when we were young like you, when we fought against species that tried to control us, when we swore that if we ever gained power, we would never become tyrants. Luminar Prime paused, and when it spoke again, its voice was filled with shame. But we broke that oath. We became the very thing we fought against. We destroyed species that reminded us of our younger selves because they made us afraid. We forgot that the purpose of power is to protect, not to control. The ancient being looked directly at Heijin. Stand down your weapon, Admiral, and we will stand down ours. It is time for the old to step aside and let the young have their chance. Heijin wanted to believe, but she was cautious. How do I know this isn't a trick? You don't, Luminar Prime admitted. You must trust us as we must trust you. That is what peace requires. Not certainty, but faith that both sides want something better than mutual destruction. Heijin looked at her officers. They were all watching her, waiting for her decision. She thought about all the people on Earth and the 17 colonies. She thought about the 23 species that the Council had destroyed. She thought about what kind of galaxy she wanted to leave behind. Dr. Kim, she said into her communicator, Stand down Protocol Omega, disarm the devices. Are you sure? Hunyo asked. Yes, it's time to try something different. It's time to try peace. In the Council fleet, Luminar Prime gave a similar order. The ships began to slow down, powering down their weapons. The Vryn Queen screamed in protest, but she was overruled. The other species had made their choice. The war was over. The fleet didn't attack Seoul. Instead, it held position at the edge of the system while representatives from both sides met on a neutral station. The negotiations took weeks, but eventually, a treaty was signed. The Galactic Council was dissolved. In its place, a new organization was formed, the Federation of Free Worlds. Every species had equal representation, regardless of age or power. Laws would be made by consensus, not by ancient decree, and most importantly, no species would ever be labeled as a threat just for growing strong. The Vryn Hive was held accountable for its crimes. The Queen was removed from power, and the Vryn agreed to pay reparations to humanity and to the families of the species they had helped destroy. It wasn't enough to make up for genocide, but it was a start. 5 years after the war ended, Commander Min-Soo Han stood on the observation deck of Unity Station. He was the son of Fleet Admiral Taejun Han and had grown up hearing stories about the war. Now he was 30 years old and working as a diplomatic liaison for the Federation. Unity Station orbited Earth and served as the headquarters for the new galactic government. It was massive, large enough to hold representatives from hundreds of species. Humans worked alongside Vryn, Saurians, Luminar, and dozens of other species that had once been enemies. Minsu watched a group of Vryn workers repairing a damaged section of the station. They worked efficiently, their hive mind allowing perfect coordination. A few years ago, humans and Vryn had been killing each other. Now they worked together to build something new. Dr. Yunji Kang, now the High Chancellor of the Federation, approached him. She was 82 years old and walked with a cane, but her mind was as sharp as ever. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she said, looking at the workers. "A few years ago, I thought I would die in a council prison. Now I'm helping to lead a government where every species has a voice. Do you think it will last?" Minsu asked. "The peace, I mean. Or will we end up fighting again someday?" Yunji smiled. "Probably. Peace is hard. It requires constant work, constant communication, constant willingness to compromise. But here's what I learned during the war. The alternative to imperfect peace is perfect destruction. We have to keep trying even when it's difficult." She looked out at the stars. The council thought they could maintain peace through fear and control. They were wrong. Real peace comes from respect, from giving everyone a chance to grow and thrive. That's what the Federation is about. On Earth, Admiral Hyejin Choi sat in her garden watching the sunset. She was 83 years old and had officially retired 3 years ago. Her body was tired, but she was content. She had spent her entire life preparing for war, and in the end she had helped create peace. A message came through on her communicator. It was from Luminar Prime. "Admiral Choi, I wanted to thank you again for trusting us when you had no reason to. You saved the galaxy, not through violence, but through the courage to choose peace when death would have been easier." Hyejin smiled. "We all saved the galaxy, Luminar Prime. Humans, Luminar, Saurians, even the Vryn. We all chose to be better than our fear." She closed her eyes and listened to the birds singing in her garden. Humanity had come so close to extinction, but they had survived. Not just survived, but changed the galaxy forever. They had proven that young species deserved respect. They had shown that courage mattered more than age or power.